Hello and welcome to yet another edition of DUTV Special. With us today we have two very special guests, New Yorkers, that is visiting the city of ours, Dubrovnik and the region. Also traveling throughout East Europe. I think it's going to be quite nice to reflect on what they saw, what they felt, and also not only to get their views on the culture, but to talk about very important aspects of education. For tonight with us we have Cristabel Quigley, Dr. Cristabel Quigley, an expert in education, or more precisely, good evening. She'll tell us what it's all about.
Good evening, Vico. It's so nice to be here with you.
Very pleased to have you with us. You know, as we spoke earlier, you said some very important things in terms of education, but prior to it, let's establish you have a doctorate in educational leadership,
administration, and policy. So it's truly about helping school districts and schools set the vision for what they're looking to accomplish, how to do it, and then how to implement federal and state policies as well as local district policies at the school level.
I think it's a great opportunity for us to discuss such matters for in our country as well, here in Croatia. We do have some differences in opinions as to how to proceed, how to have a better education. I think the whole world is really kind of, you know, looking at things, what could work, what could not work. If I'm not mistaken, New York or the US is trying to follow in parts an academic model based upon Canadian. Is that correct?
Actually, both the United States and New York City Department of Education, for which I work, has been looking at reform initiatives for over a decade. And part of it is that while our students have been doing fairly well, the world has changed around us, and we need to look at education for the future, not just what has been done in the past. And so nationally we had panels meet and develop what they call the Common Core standards, which were standards in literacy and math, really focused on the development of knowledge, but more importantly, once you get to grades 3 and above, which would be about 8 years old and up, how well students are able to apply the knowledge. We've had a great, we had panels that worked on developing the standards. They went through rounds of feedback nationally with websites where you could write in your thoughts and opinion on it. Over 40 states have adopted it. They are looking at different assessment measures to measure our progress to the standards in helping our students achieve. And it's an ongoing work in progress, because while we know we've started it and we've put steps in place, we know that we're changing our entire instructional core. We're not only changing what we teach, we're changing how we teach. And that also means we have to change the tools we use to teach.
Very important, also probably very difficult, I should say, for our audience, is that you work in New York School District, which actually not in several districts, 6 districts if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And New York as a whole has over 1 million students in lower classes, and you work in 35, with 35 different schools. That's
Sure.
a whole lot of students, a whole lot of teachers. How do you, is it difficult to apply such a model? Do people kind of go against it? Do they go with it?
Actually, we've been through several reforms, and this is the current model that we're using now, because we know that schools need support. Not just somebody telling them what to do. My job is to go in there and explain to them and work alongside with them on how to do it. And so we work on several levels. Initially, I might work very directly with the principal of the schools, and then I'll work with their instructional team, which might be the principal and his assistants and some key teachers. And within every school, we work towards developing content experts. We call them our ambassadors in my network, in that we build up their content knowledge as well as their pedagogy, their ability to teach aligned to the new expectations of the Common Core standards. and we bring them together across schools so they not only know what's happening in their school, they are visiting other elementary or middle schools and going in classrooms and working with those teachers. So as colleagues, they can discuss the expectations, they can look at students and student work and determine what the children are able to do, and as a group come up with some collective advice for other things that the teacher who was teaching the class they observe can do to really improve the practice and help the students succeed.
It sounds very interesting, almost like an organized brainstorming session of sorts on a larger scale. It seems that you're using really all the potential to put into and then to make the changes that would resolve really in some important aspects, and that is the knowledge, the developed knowledge. The question is how to apply it.
True.
And that's the model, that's the push forward toward the application of it.
True. When you look at the Common Core standards, my background is in literacy. That's where my area of expertise has been over the years. And one of the biggest changes in the approach to literacy is that for many years we had a literature-based approach to literacy, which would be narrative fiction and sometimes narrative nonfiction, but it was more literature, with content nonfiction working in social studies or science or the arts or whatever the technical subject would be. But now the emphasis in literacy is really broken into three strands. And the one that the emphasis on nonfiction is major because we need to teach our students how to learn. When you look at what has happened since the internet, there is more information than anyone can possibly sit down and learn in the course of a school career. But what we need to teach them is how to access that information, how to become independent learners. So they need to know how to research. But a critical aspect of that, which is something we became aware of even before the Common Core, once students started researching on the internet, they felt everything they could find in writing was accurate. And that's not true.
Validation, of course, is a whole separate problem with it.
Absolutely. So one of the strengths of the standards is the emphasis on the argumentative or persuasive piece. So we're helping students not only to read and then craft arguments, but to read and analyze so that as they read a piece of text, whether it's on the internet or in a newspaper or a book or a blog, that they start to look at the language that the author used. Is there a point of view that is coming across? What sort of information is the author using to support their facts? Does the argument hold up? Does he examine a counterclaim? And what would your challenges? When you think about what we need to do with education and going forward, is we always talk about education as leading out. We're looking at a world that is changing very rapidly around us. Our students who are in school today may have careers that we can't even imagine what they are.
That is a very interesting approach, to actually anticipate possibilities, then aim the learning model toward them.
Right. So one of the major emphasis that has come out of this is that the traditional ways that we looked at things, where we were looking to see whether they had a literal understanding of content knowledge, now we're looking at how well do they problem solve? Can they critically think? Do they question? Questioning is very important. Are they monitoring as they're reading or doing their math, checking whether they understand it? Is there another way to do it? Because when you think about what is coming ahead of them, they need to constantly be self-assessing what they know and are able to do, as well as identifying what they may need to learn how to do. It became something very relevant to many American people in 2008 when our financial markets shifted.
Certainly.
And many people on Wall Street lost their jobs. Now these are people who went to good schools, finished their college, got their masters, did everything right or by the books. But
and
now
all of a sudden, right.
Now all of a sudden the landscape has shifted. And they needed to look at their skill set, what they knew, what they were able to do, and try to identify the opportunities for them to reinvent themselves and find a career going forward. When you think about it, that's what we'll all be doing.
That's what we'll all be doing. In fact, now to go along with a thought, sub-thought within your answer to this question, there is a couple more challenges. Well, one is really worldwide, and that is the challenge of learning with new technologies. What follows what and which possible ways. And the other model is really a New York model, which is a challenge, I should say. 200 or so languages within the school districts. We're talking about a world at large within a small geographic area.
Yes, but it is a challenge for our teachers.
It's an amazing thing to put all that together.
It is. It's a challenge for our entire system. But it makes our system better because the different cultures that come in bring their knowledge, they bring their culture, they bring their language, they bring their traditions and history. So it really makes us challenged, where we need to be thinking about, how do I take this content and not just leave it as lifeless words or numbers on a page? How do I make it relevant? How can I use visuals, manipulatives, tangible objects that they can use to count, say, in mathematics or build with? How can I give them another way in? And it's also very important, as they're learning the language, to give them multiple ways to express what they know. Because one of the most important things with our English language learners is to recognize that while they may not speak English, they do come in with a wealth of knowledge. And we need to help them tap into that and express it. So many times you will find initially that some of them might be representing their knowledge in not necessarily an essay, but maybe something visual. It might be a PowerPoint. It could be, in the very early grades, it could be something they draw or build, but you have to give them different ways to express it. And the multiple ways of both teaching them and also learning from them and learning what they know is what enriches us all.
In one of our conversations, I thought he had an amazing thought, and that is the realization on parts of students, also perhaps professors and teachers, is to impart to students or to pupils the knowledge that school is the beginning of knowledge. Nothing ends there.
That is the biggest shift we need to think about with education. In the past, people might have said, I finished high school, I finished college, I have my master's, I'm done. Well, if that's your approach, you're done. Because if the world changes, you will not be able to adjust to it. So that's another piece that we are working very hard to put in the schools, and it's the idea of productive struggle. There's a lot of research. There's a researcher out of Pennsylvania, Duckworth, who looked at grit and resilience. And there were analyses that sometimes our brightest students, if when they went to work on something, it didn't come easy, they would stop because they expected they would just know it. And they didn't have the idea of, I can work at this, I can struggle with this, and I can learn from this. And when you think about going forward, that's what we need. So very much when we talk about application in our education, where children are given tasks to do, whether it's mathematics or science or social studies, they're giving something to look at and analyze. And we are not asking them to do this first, that second, and steps in the process. We want to see how they approach it and guide them through the process, but they need to work at it. Because when you think about life, nothing just comes easy. It is something that you're constantly going to be required to think about and make decisions and choose options. And when this fails, I go a step back and try another direction. And we will need more of that as our career path changes.
On a final note, we don't have much time in this show. It's fairly short span. However, on a final thought, if what should we be all looking at when it comes to education? What kind of a world would Dr. Quigley like to see?
I would like all children to have the opportunity for a full, rich education that includes the arts and music, as well as the math, the science, and the technology. We find for many of our students, particularly our struggling students, sometimes there's alternative routes. And that's very important. When I first worked in the Department of Ed, I was an intervention teacher. So I worked with, in literacy, I worked with the students who really struggled with reading. And what was amazing was that writing frequently is what broke open the door for them. And so when you think about all students, they need the opportunities to engage in a variety of topics on relevant material. Many of our schools now, the projects that students are involved with involve civil issues in the neighborhood, whether it's the question of fracking to get gas, or the need to have curbs changed so that the handicapped can access things. And these are all adult problem-solving situations.
Well, I'm very glad we had this opportunity to talk on here, and I'm also hoping some of our policy changers and people who have some kind of an input into education will certainly see it and perhaps take a look at some of the ideas we discussed and perhaps use some in our education system, or who knows?
Who knows? Hopefully. I think one of the biggest challenges that we always face in education as we try to adjust is though everyone feels they're an expert on the subject because they went to school. And yes, they do know what education was for them whenever they sat in that seat or in that chair, but it's different now. And the other part that has always been an influence on education is politics. And schools technically were started to help people in an area preserve their culture, preserve their history, preserve their language, and to build good citizens. But what we need to be thinking about that is if we're building citizens for the future, we have to give them the opportunities to think and explore and challenge themselves and realize that this will be a lifelong process.
With this great thought, I'd like to end this part of the show. Thank you very much once more. So pleased to have you in Dubrovnik with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hello again. We continue our DUTV special with Carl Quigley. Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
What brings you to Dubrovnik? Here you swung up to Budapest for an alumni reunion.
Well, there was an alumni reunion in Budapest. We had about 30 of our St. Francis alums at a nice restaurant. They graduated years and years ago, so it was really a great moment for us to reconnect, see what everyone was doing, and kind of make plans for the future. And then we jumped off and went to the European Championships.
Well, I imagine you as a coach for many years, water polo coach for many years, just had a particular look at it, perhaps a bit of an emotion to it.
Yeah, it was very, it was emotional. It was just good to see these guys after such a long period of time, and girls for that matter. We had a couple of girls there from our teams also in attendance. But it was a great, great afternoon.
So many years in water polo, but your alma mater is St. Francis College. That's the college you went to with some great success here, and also the college that you coached for many years, water polo team. So many experiences, so many years, so many different cultures.
Yeah, it's the small college of big dreams, and St. Francis College water polo really dreamed big. And for a few years there, at least recently, those dreams did come true. Our goal was to make the NCAA Final Four, and we made it in 2005 when I was coaching, and subsequent to that, we made it 3 of the last 4 years. Unfortunately, we didn't win the national championship, but we did very well and represented the East Coast in that competition very well.
A lot of young players, polo players, choose to go to college, to St. Francis College. If I were one of those, what would bring me there?
I think what would intrigue someone to come to St. Francis is the adventure of going to New York City. The diversity of culture in New York City alone,
There's no question about it.
It's unmatched anywhere in the world. If you wanted to get Croatian food, you could find it. If you wanted to find Hungarian goulash, you could find it. So you will meet people from all over the world, and you'll get perspectives in the classroom and on the street that you wouldn't get anywhere else, both political, emotional, and such. So it's a great place to learn. And I often tell people that I recruit that, you know, you may not want to live in New York forever, but it's an adventure. And then you'll be able to say, I've been there, done that, and I want to stay, or been there, done that, and I'm going to move along to someplace else.
What's the feedback you got from all those guys years ago? Now that you met them in Hungary, that you hang out around Europe, Southeast Europe more precisely, you met those guys that you knew in New York, you met in New York, and now some years have passed. What do they say?
Well, it's great. The intriguing thing is they came to St. Francis as young men and some boys, and to see them mature, and now they have children and families and are preparing for their future. The boys and girls that we met the men and women we met in Budapest, they had already made a choice to come back to Eastern Europe. There are a few that stay in the States. Some get lucky and get jobs, and their companies work out visas so that they can stay even longer. And some actually marry some pretty young American women and stay and have families there. So the boys in Hungary, I think, are doing really, really well. A couple are in information technology. Some are dealing in hedge funds. And I'm very proud of them. One is a dentist in Budapest as well. So it's a very, very eclectic group, and not only personality-wise, but what their choices were when they left St. Francis.
Well, it was a thought of yours which was compelling to me, which is a game is a means to an end, but game as such is just part of life. And you, as someone who's in love with polo, you've been playing water polo for many years, and then you coached for many years, and now you're in the capital, if I may say so, in the world capital of water polo, Dubrovnik. You still view, you see polo as just part of life, an important part nonetheless, but only a part. You look at a big picture.
Well, everything's connected. I mean, the games children play, the games men play, help develop you as a whole person. And water polo is probably one of the most unique games in that regard. You have to control your temper, you have to work with teammates. I particularly think it's wonderful for women. And the growth of women's water polo in the States is really fantastic. Us in New York are growing it, and in the eastern part of the United States with some of our alumni through United States Water Polo are doing a good job of growing it as well. But as a means for an end, it's part of the whole process of learning. And with good coaching, with a good competitive environment, children grow up into be boys, and boys grow up to be men, and it creates a totally whole person, and they can make good decisions, not only in a game, but also in life.
Certainly, it was an interesting viewpoint of yours as well, that you saw the kids playing in the town of Cavtat, which you also visited. You thought there was a particular freedom. Kids were going left and right, playing freely. It was something not very common to see in New York.
Yeah, it's different in the States. I witnessed, you know, through the club at Cavtat, Coach Gino and
the president,
the captain, president of the club, and the captain Antonio took really nice care of me and introduced me to several people, and we actually took a ride around the harbor of Cavtat. But what I noticed about the social environment of the pool And let me digress for a moment. A couple of things happened in my water polo life that were seismic. One was when we took a team to California, to Stanford University, and we had finally made it as a team to play at a very high level. And we competed against the Pepperdines, the USCs, and the Stanfords of the world. Yesterday, when I arrived in Safta, I saw that course in the bay outside of, in the town, and it was just amazing. The setting, the lighting, everything was just idyllic. And what a perfect place for children to grow up. And clearly the environment was different in the States. In the United States, everyone's worried about liability and such. And here kids are running around freely and clearly playing the game, playing with each other, and creating an amazing environment of joy.
US, a big country. Of course, polo is, we could say, small compared to some other sports like baseball, say basketball or something. However, when compared to the other places, you do have a lot of clubs, varsity teams and clubs. And also there's a difference between, I understand, East and West Coast in approaches.
Yeah, the United States has grown water polo a lot. Unfortunately, at the Division I varsity level in the NCAA, there's still only about 60 teams. We lose a couple, we gain a few, and we're right at the threshold where, this sport may be at a little bit of a risk. But holistically across the country, we're looking at, 300 schools actually have club teams. They may not be sponsored by an athletic department, but they're sponsored by student activity funds. So there's an enormous amount of people playing. So when World Champions comes up and Euro Championships come up, you see a lot of interest in the Olympic Games as well across the nation. NCAAs, men and women, are well attended. It's not hitting the major airways like soccer is. If you looked at the World Cup this last year, they hit the big time. Everyone in New York City was rooting for USA, and then even when the USA was knocked out, they still continued to tune in to the knockout rounds that went after the US was knocked out. And we really need to have the same kind of energy and the same kind of promotion for water polo to really take off like soccer did.
It's the same Francis alumnus. Of course, you might be partial to the school, but school is overall good, is fully accredited. And also, there are a lot of alumni from Eastern Europe, some from Croatia. We know from our parts here, southern Croatia, also from Split, from various parts, Zagreb and up north. You're not recruiting, are you?
Not always recruiting, always looking to bring really interested men and women who are highly intelligent. We like people that are real smart, that are determined to get a degree and want to really kind of change the world. We're a school based in the Franciscan tradition, and we've had great success. And some of your countrymen here from Croatia, specifically from Zagreb, we have a family of Verdoliak brothers, Nikola, Andreas, and Turko, all made their way through St. Francis. We have another Zagreb fellow, Janko Gogolia, who I met in Budapest. He was on business there, and I got a chance, I haven't seen him in 15 years, to engage him again. And there's a Filip Sasic from Korčula, and we have our current coach, Srđan Mihavalić, is from Split, and I'm traveling to Split tomorrow to meet him and his family. And there is one other, you may have heard him, this Vinko, who played for Dubrovnik, and he came to St. Francis and kind of put us on the map in terms of getting us from a Division II level to a Division I level. So we have a rich Croatian tradition at St. Francis. And we also have students from Serbia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Egypt, Israel, Sweden, and we love the diversity and the richness that those people bring to our existence at St. Francis. And we then teach them this Franciscan tradition, and they go out and change the world.
You being a native New Yorker natural, you grew up with all these various, how shall I put it, well, with the world in small, all these different cultures, people from all over the world. So I'm going to assume here that there was no cultural shock with you traveling to various places. Were there surprises? Were there cultural differences that you found a bit odd?
There's always cultural things. When you visit a new place, it's always exciting. You know, I had a long trip. I visited family in Ireland, and I had to drive on the other side of the road. I went to Vienna, and they're a very orderly society, and similarly, so is Budapest. I was fascinated by that, and I was fascinated by the remnants of the Soviet Union's influence in the area. I was particularly smitten by the love of the people of Croatia when I came. It was just remarkable that my wife and I were really embraced by the people of Saftat, and we hope to return someday.
A great thought. We do hope to have you back sometime. Thank you very much for being on our show tonight.
It's my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching us. Stay with our program. We'll see you next time. Good night.